Thank you. Did you all recognize that tune? Marilyn, it's I'll Fly Away. Yes, a very special kind of jazzy rendition of it. Well, I'm so glad to see all of you here this afternoon. On behalf of the writing class, we're really grateful for your attendance, and I hope you'll enjoy this afternoon with us. Before we start, I just want to say that there will be a scripture reading and a prayer, and then we will sing a hymn that is really quite extraordinary and special. I think Marilyn and Rebecca have done the research on this hymn, written by a gentleman who lived here, George Simons, lived here at the Grove for some years. He lived to be 101 years of age. So he wrote a poem, and then that poem was set to music, and that's what we're going to sing today. So you have a copy of this in front of you, I hope. Some of you may share, so that this beautiful poem by Reverend Simmons has been set to music, and you also have a copy of the poem itself, which is really very beautiful. So that will be sung just before our readers begin. So we can move along in a timely manner. I'm going to open today with a scripture reading from Romans 5, 1 and 2, and it's from the RSV. Therefore, since we are justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus. Through him, we have obtained access to this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in our hope of sharing the glory of God. God's message to his people. Thanks be to God. Let us join together in prayer. Creator God, we joyfully come together today as your people, sharing with one another life experiences and memories, grateful for the lives we've lived in your grace, and with the hope to follow you and be part of your continuing creation. We give you the glory and praise for the community in which we thrive, and pray for those who feel alienated from any trusted supporting community. We ask your blessing on those who will tell us today of memorable times or moments in their lives. We pray this in the name of the Christ. Amen. So now if you will take your music, Marilyn is going to accompany us, and thanks to Jeannie, she's going to lead the singing. You don't want me to lead the singing. I would empty the room in a matter of seconds. You want to come in here?
And Gabriel's towering rage lies Monte Vista Grove, a place where servants of the Lord rejoice to call their home from many places round the globe and from the USA. We came and found the perfect place to live till close of day. Home of untold blessings, where we live raise, offering our thanksgiving in glad hymns of praise, offering our thanksgiving in glad hymns of praise. We lived midst palms and mighty oaks and gardens wet with dew, wherever we may care to stroll, our flowers of every hue. For those, Lord, who this place did plan, where we may spend our days, we bless thee for them, and we sing to thee our hymns of praise. Home of untold blessings, where we lift our eyes to majestic mountains, reaching to the skies. For God's gracious bounty, we our voices raise, offering our thanksgiving in glad hymns of praise, offering our thanksgiving in glad hymns of praise.
I think we could all say amen to the words of that beautiful poem and song. In celebration of this centennial year, today we will hear poetry and storied remembrances from 6 members of our Life Review class. We meet here in the FLC at 10 a.m. every Thursday morning, and we welcome visitors and those of you who might be interested in joining the class. This is a non-credit class offered through Pasadena City College and so capably taught by Professor AnnaWalker. I'm sorry she's not with us today, but this is spring break for Pasadena City College. This week is. The majority of class members are residents of Monte Vista Grove Homes, but there are several long-term class members from the community outside. Laura is one of them, and she's here this afternoon with us. We're now working on a 4th book to be published sometime, to be purchased and available in September. So if some of the stories have intrigued you, if you want to know the next part of the stories, you can pick up a book in September. So our readers today are going to introduce themselves and the titles of their poetry and stories. Enjoy. Thank you for being here. Catherine?
Hi. My name is Catherine Cummings. I don't really like microphones. My name is Catherine Cummings. My first poem, Stay, Sweet Memory, Stay. Oh, memory, sweet memory, why art thou fleeting so fast? Were we not bonded to be one as life shall last? Now you appear to be drifting off. Tell me, am I right or am I wrong? I fail now to envision that day when I will let you leave. That cannot be. That must not be. You cannot ever let me grieve. Fade you must not, vibrant, sharp, you must remain. Stay, sweet memory, stay. My next poem, The Tangerine Thief. He looks furtively around, plucks a tangerine from my neighbor's overladen tree with fruit ripe for the picking. Racing across my yard, the wily thief climbs up the wall, settles overlooking my sapling corn stalks. With razor-sharp teeth, he undresses a section of the fruit, sucks, juice dripping down his fat cheeks, chomps down on pulp, then discards unwanted portions in my pristine corn patch. Gorged to the max, Fatso scurries up the hillside, I guess to have a nap. This tangerine thieving squirrel,
I'm Alan Reuter, and this is titled A Gracious Rescue. It was a warm, sunny, casual day in the month of June 1968 in the San Joaquin Valley of California. We were driving our Volkswagen Bug up the Super Freeway 5 on our way to our home in Fremont and Centerville Presbyterian Church, my place of work. We had been married a year and had birthed our first child, a 3-month-old son named Brooke. He was in the back seat quietly enjoying the ride as my wife Olivia and I enjoyed the scenery of rolling hills and fertile pastures. Then suddenly, the little auto lost its ability to continue. It noisily notified me of its inability to go, requiring me, the driver, to pull off the highway onto the shoulder of the road. We didn't know what was wrong and what to do. Our destination was well over an hour away. We were surrounded by open fields, rolling hills, and a major freeway. But stores, buildings, houses, and especially people were not in sight. We despaired. We wondered what to do. We had no cell phones. We prayed, Lord, help us. We don't know what to do. Then a car pulled up behind us and 3 men got out. Approaching our car on the driver's side, they said, "Do you need some help?" "Yeah, it won't go," I responded. "Well, where are you headed?" "Fremont," I replied. "Well, if you've got a chain or a rope, we can pull you." All I had was a cotton cord, but they made it work, and so our humble little Volkswagen was attached to the rear of their auto, and they pulled us about 30 miles or so into the city of Tracy, where we stopped at an auto repair shop and rented a T-bar that would attach our smaller vehicle to their larger one, enabling them to pull us. The only problem was that we didn't have $45 needed to rent the bar. So these 3 men loaned us the money, moved by the promise I would pay them back. The trip continued for about another hour until we arrived at our apartment in the city of Fremont and the suburb of Centerville. Relieved and grateful, we invited them in for a cup of coffee and a repayment of $45. As we talked, we expressed our thanks and described what we did, and then asked the question, what do you men do? We are mental patients at Oak Knoll Hospital in Oakland. Oh. There was a pause in the conversation. Olivia looked at me bewildered and later confessed that she wondered if these men were safe to be with. I also was taken back. Then it came out. We are Vietnam veterans who are PTSD patients, recovering from the stress and pain of war. Wow, I thought. These men who served our country are still available to serve and help the needy. They came alongside a young married couple with a baby and met our needs and answered their prayers. We ended our time with this question. Can I pray for you? I did. Thank you.
My name is Marilee Robertson, and the story I'm going to read is entitled My Love Affair with Guatemala. How could anyone not fall in love with Guatemala? I've just counted up and realized that I've been there 5 times. The first time was with a Witness for Peace delegation. Everything was carefully planned, our orientation, travel, meals, lodging, and who we would meet. We first went to Chiapas in southern Mexico, where we visited a settlement of Guatemalans who had fled the violence of their...
You gotta hold it closer.
Okay, we first went to Chiapas in southern Mexico, where we visited a settlement of Guatemalans who had fled the violence of their country and had taken refuge in Mexico. After a few days, we crossed the border into Guatemala by bus. We passed through the countryside with its steep cornfields and looming volcanoes, then across to Santiago Atitlan, a town plagued by military violence. As I said, all arrangements were made by Witness for Peace volunteers, and I just went along and observed. But I knew I would come back. As soon as I retired, I decided to study Spanish for 6 weeks in Quetzaltenango. This trip was entirely different. I was on my own, had to deal with lost baggage, getting a taxi, finding a hotel, getting around by bus. At first, this was scary, but eventually it was exhilarating, choosing new places to see, one of which was Todos Santos in the highlands, where I stayed with a mom family for a week. My third trip to Guatemala happened like this. While attending the Presbyterian General Assembly in 1995, I learned that a Guatemalan pastor, Manuel Saquic, had been brutally tortured and murdered on a military base. Julianne Moffat, coordinator for Central America and the Caribbean, told me that the church in Guatemala was asking for people to accompany several persons who were being threatened by the same death squad that had murdered Manuel. Would I be interested in doing this? Well, yes, I would. I went home to rearrange my life for the fall. Here's my journal entry for August 25, 1995. Next week at this time, I will be in Guatemala. Julianne called Monday to say that the time is now, that they need someone to accompany 2 pastors and a laywoman who have received death threats. Now I'm asking myself, am I internally prepared to do this? What will it be like? Will I be with one person constantly? Where will I live? And if I get in a tight situation, will I be scared? Well, I know I will. But will I be able to act and function anyway? I found comfort in today's lectionary reading of the 32nd Psalm. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of deliverance. On Thursday, August 31st, 1995, this was my journal entry. This evening, Frank, my brother-in-law, took me to the airport. After getting checked in, we went upstairs and had coffee, and then he left, and I boarded the plane. While waiting on the runway, I was noticing how many people there are working outside the plane, signaling, driving little trucks with trailers and other vehicles, and thinking of all the cleaning crews in the airport, the waiting rooms and restrooms, and the crews that sweep through the plane between flights. Probably don't get paid very much, but the whole operation would be impossible without them. It's a microcosm of the world. Most of the people who hold it together are unnoticed and undervalued. My next journal entry was on the next day. This has been one of the most unusual days I have ever had or will have. It started out as expected. After an overnight flight with no sleep, someone met me with a sign saying Marwick, and they were there to meet me and whisked me off for about an hour's drive to Chimaltenango, the home of Lucio and Josefina Martinez. There I met with Judith Feaster, a Methodist missionary working in the Quiché area. She was standing in for a week between the regular accompaniers. After breakfast, she told me about the plan for the day, but that if I preferred, I could stay home and sleep. I was exhausted, but after what I heard, what the day was to hold, I decided that sleep could wait.
Next thing.
I'm Howard Den Hartog. Come August, I will have been at the Grove for 15 years. The name of my story is Holding Two Teenagers at Gunpoint. It had been a typical Iowa day with temperatures around 75 to 80 degrees. The humidity would have been about the same. Perfect corn growing weather. We also had a normal amount of rainfall during the summer. The gardens did well. Everything was green, lawns, roadside ditches, cow pastures, and hay fields. Everywhere you looked, it was green, green, green. Corn grows well with warm, exceptionally humid days and nights. When you woke up in the mornings, you could see the corn leaves. They were pointed up to the heavens. Our home sat on a hill facing south with a large front porch. Maybe 75 yards south of our home was a blacktop surface highway running east and west. It had no white lines running down the middle of the road. That's just the way it was during the middle of the last century. Our farm was large, 618 acres. Compared with other surrounding Iowa farms, which would have been around 80, 120, 160, or 220 acres at the time. We raised corn, soybeans, hay, and livestock. South of the highway was a large cornfield, around 75 acres. South of the cornfield was a railroad. The train ran twice a day. South of the railroad track, we had a 180-acre field called the river bottom. It could flood with high water. A driveway went around our home and connected to the highway. On the other side of the highway was a gate leading to the cornfield. A pathway for driving through the cornfield led down to 8 acres of sand. It was not good for growing field crops. Since we could not farm it, my dad let John Gallagher and his son, who lived in our local town, use it for truck farming. They sure could raise delicious watermelons, cantaloupes, sweet potatoes, and tomatoes. This was their livelihood. On the farm, we ate supper at 6 o'clock. Afterwards, my mom washed the dishes and I dried them. This was in the late 40s or early 50s. We had no TV. In the evenings, we sat on the front porch, read the newspaper, and just visited, and just watching the world go by. About the time it would get dark, the fireflies would begin to come out. Next came the mosquitoes. When they began to bite, it was time to go inside. Before going to bed, quite often we'd have a piece of watermelon or a dish of ice cream. We would usually hit the hay around 9 o'clock. This particular evening, when I went to bed, I immediately fell asleep. About 9:10, my folks heard a car door slam. They knew someone was up to something. The car was headed to the watermelon patch or field. My dad hollered up to me and told me to get dressed. As soon as I got dressed and shoes on, my dad was waiting for me in the car. He had grabbed my .410 shotgun. The moon was out, so we could see the way to the melon patch with our lights off. When we got closer, my dad turned the car lights on. I was holding the .410 on my lap. We could see some boys in front of us and a car by the melon patch as well. As soon as we stopped the car, we got out. I was holding the .410 gun. We could hear someone running through the cornfield. 2 boys had frozen in front of us and did not run. My father, in no uncertain terms, asked the boys what in the blank blank they were doing. He then told them he was going to call the sheriff. He turned the car around and drove up the path to our home. Here I was, all alone with only a flashlight and a .410 shotgun pointing at the 2 boys. I am sure the boys were shaking in their boots, and I probably was also. By this time, it was probably around 9:30. At this time of night, the local operator could have been asleep, but she was still awake, thank goodness. We had the old telephone system in which we used plugs to go from one party to another who you wanted to talk with. As soon as my dad called the sheriff, he came back to where I was holding the 2 boys at bay. The sheriff arrived around 35 to 40 minutes later. The 2 boys were probably 13 to 16 years old, my age. 2 to 4 weeks later, 5 boys, accompanied by their mothers, appeared for the justice of peace in the living room of his home. He lectured the boys and told them the seriousness of what they had done. He then fined the boys $20 each. The boys' mothers came, prepared with enough money to pay the fine. The judge would have nothing to do with that. He told the boys they would have to find jobs and pay the fines themselves. They were given several weeks to earn the money. I don't believe the boys ever went close to a melon patch again. A postscript. As I wrote this story, it dawned on me that I may have forgotten to put bullets in the gun in the excitement of the occasion. I have been holding 2 boys at gunpoint, possibly with an empty gun. My nephew, who is now 73 years old, still has my old 410. I had given it to him when he was around 12 or 13 years old in one of our moves.
My name is Jim Simons, and my story is The Best Advice My Father Gave Me. When I think about the best advice my father gave me, I begin with what he did not give me. He did not impose a rigid set of principles that would put limits on what I could say or think or do. He had a strong moral compass that would guide his behavior, and he would lead by example more than by lists of do's and don'ts. It was important to him that he and his family would treat all people fairly and with respect and compassion. He was guided by the teaching of Jesus, love your neighbor as you love yourself. In our family, we all had chores that contributed to a well-run household, but I do not remember being overwhelmed by lists of duties for each person. We all took turns washing and wiping the dishes after meals, and it was always fun to do this with Dad. If he was washing and I was wiping, he would say with a twinkle in his eye, "Jimmy boy, a strong dish wiper makes any dishwasher look good." It seemed like there was a positive emphasis on each person contributing to the family welfare instead of individuals having a list of duties. I do not remember being spanked, but I do remember Dad rapping me by the side of my head with his finger when I did something wrong. If he said, "Jimmy boy, I figured I was not in trouble. But if he said, "Sonny boy, I knew I needed to shape up. I learned early on that it was easier and more fun to cooperate with Dad than to make him say, "Sonny boy," and lay down the law with a set of regulations that neither of us wanted. What Dad communicated to me by word and deed was that I was part of a family that was bound together by love, and we were encouraged to give and receive support for each other. The family grounded our lives, and we could count on each other. We were part of a network that included other families living in a stable neighborhood, Boy Scout Troop 180, Laurelhurst Elementary School, and Westminster Presbyterian Church. Dad wanted me to feel connected to this rich network, and advice that he gave was geared toward the joy of fulfilling the potential of these relationships more than following a set of rules. So here is the best advice he gave me. Rules are made to be broken. He actually said that to me several times when I was starting high school. Why would a good dad say such a thing? The answer to that question is why I love and respect my dad more than any person I know. He did not say that in a vacuum. He wanted me to see that there is something more to life than just following the rules. And you never should break rules unless you have good reason. You don't drive on the wrong side of the road. You don't dump garbage on your neighbor's property. You don't lie or steal. Most rules are to be followed because they are sensible, practical, safe. For all of us, there are moments when we need to reach beyond the normal to do something that is extraordinary, something unexpected, something inspiring, something beyond the rules. Another interpretation of Dad's comment is that rules form a base or grounding for our lives, but we must reach beyond them through relationships to experience the fullness of life. Don't just follow the rules, but strive in every way you can to fulfill the possibilities of life-giving relationships. Wherever Dad went, he called for smiles. He would often say when greeting someone, "Sally, you look like $1 million." And Sally would smile. A business associate of my father once told me that Dad changed the climate of business meetings when he entered the room. Tension would build between people until Dad walked in, gave everyone a smile, made a quip that got a laugh, and suddenly everyone was relaxed and at peace. But rules are made to be broken can lead to trouble if you're not careful. And sometimes Dad would go too far with his mantra. When I was 12 years old, our family took a vacation car trip to Banff and Lake Louise in Canada. At the entrance to a restaurant, there was a fairly large bear sitting with his back to the wall. Thinking that he must be tame with all the visitors around, I said to my dad, "I would like to pet that bear." Instead of warning me to be careful according to the rules that wild animals can be dangerous, he asked me to wait a minute while he got his movie camera. So I slowly approached the bear with camera running. As I slowly reached out my hand to pet the bear, there was a loud roar, and the bear tried to claw me with his arm. I jumped back just in time. Dad and I learned that there are times when you need to follow the rules, not break them. What Dad gave me as a child and an adult was a sense that life is an adventure and that I was capable of finding fulfilling relationships that would bring deep rewards to both myself and those I met on life's way. Dad's advice focused not on rules, but relationships. That's it.
Oops. Hi, my name's Bryce Little, and my topic going to read today is my time in the U.S. Navy between 1954 and 56. In June 1954, I graduated from the University of Washington in Seattle and was commissioned a line officer in the U.S. Navy. I was 22 years of age. In San Diego, I boarded the USS Colohan at the Broadway Pier and went up the gangplank in my civilian clothes. The quarterdeck petty officer promptly asked me to identify myself. "I am Ensign Little, reporting for duty." The petty officer asked me if I was Ensign Little, our new officer. I was taken aback. The petty officer said I was too young to be an officer. I responded that I was Ensign Little, and the ship was expecting me. He then gave me permission to board the ship. It should be noted that in 1954, everyone going to university had to join one of the ROTC units, the Army, Air Force, or Navy. Being from Seattle, of course, I chose the Navy. Seattle is where I grew up, in a maritime city. Later, the Colohan departed for the Pacific Theater on its new assignment. We made various ports of call during our 6-month tour: Hawaii, Midway Island, Japan, Okinawa, and Hong Kong. On Midway Island, I was fascinated by the Goonie birds. They were large birds who rumbled and tumbled down the airstrip to take off and land. In flight, they flew beautifully and smooth. The officer military quarters on the island were called the Goonie Bird Hotel. Everything was now vacant since World War II. It was like a ghost town. It was over, the island was not needed to refuel ships or planes en route to further points in the Pacific. There were only 2 vehicles on the island that were operational and were still recovered from a collision they both got into. Upon arriving in Japan, I walked around 3 different cities in our ports of call: Yokosuka, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. It was 1955, only 10 years since the end of World War II. The impact of the 2 atomic bombs that the USA dropped was still evident. Excuse me. The Japanese had partly destroyed buildings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a memorial to the death of thousands of adults and school children. This also included leaving barren land as a memorial. Later, museums were built that showed pictures of this tragedy. I visited the museums and felt considerable personal guilt for what the USA atomic bomb tragedy and brought upon the people of Japan. These experiences are still unresolved in my thinking. I still feel the tragedy of thousands of school children who were killed or wounded on their way to the school that morning. On board ship, I carried out different official duties. I was the athletic officer, narcotic officer, and also the first lieutenant. One of my responsibilities was to keep the ship's exterior looking shipshape. Upon our visit to Hong Kong, we utilized volunteers from the local community who helped paint the ship's exterior. They also provided the gray paint. The paint was always watered down, and the new look only lasted a few months. At sea, we had a Navy chaplain who divided his time between the squadron's 8 ships. We had only one chaplain who visited us once or twice a year. He was a Southern Presbyterian naval chaplain. I felt a kindred spirit with him. He really impressed me when he would stand the mid-watch with me on the bridge while I was officer of the deck underway. This was between midnight and 4 a.m. And being like that just really impressed me. Everything was quiet then, so we talked about different things. But I remember my discussion with him about my interest in attending seminary upon leaving the Navy. He was very supportive and would always hear me out. I gained recognition for my good work as a naval officer. I was encouraged to consider the Navy as a career. I liked my time in the Navy, but I did not want to spend my life preparing for war, which was the overall purpose of the military. I was recommended to the full rank of full lieutenant, which is equivalent of the captain in the Army or the Marines. However, thinking ahead, I began to develop plans to attend theological seminary upon my completion of my 2 years on active duty. My Navy time had given me a global experience and therefore a global vision. It should be noted that I also required to spend 4 more years in the reserve following my active duty. After I finished my time in seminary, I had over 1 year to serve in the Naval Reserve. I wanted to go overseas in mission service. I felt that I could not accept a call to serve in Thailand when the U.S. was still involved militarily in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. I was afraid that my connection with the U.S. Navy would be misunderstood by my Thai colleagues. So I wrote the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, rather presumptuous on my part, asking that I may be released from my military reserve obligation. I did not hear for several weeks, and just before Phyllis and I were due to sail from San Francisco, I got a letter from the Secretary of Navy saying that I have been released from the Navy and must turn in my ID and my access to the PX for shopping. I gladly accepted these terms, and Phyllis and I left for Thailand. That's it.
Oh, it's me again, Catherine. Believe it or not, the fear is gone. Believe it or not, I feared old age. Thought of it with creeping dread. Wanted to avoid it. Tried every way to avoid it. Now here I am, a sprite old woman, the little old lady from Pasadena. And can certainly say I am proud to be one, enjoying all the special treats I can. Things once shy to do, I now indulge in. With a twinkle, a smile, I get away with for power. Few wanted to scold me or tell me, watch out. I can see it in their eyes, but their lips are shut tight. On occasion, I can be an open flirt. No trouble complimenting a fine young man or giving a deserving hot male a warm and loving hug. Come on, old ladies, don't fight it, embrace it. Sagging breasts, sagging underarms, what's the problem? If you're reading or hearing this, you're ahead of the game. It's all part of the scheme of things. So give up the fight. Enjoy the dance. Hey, with back pain and stomach ache, I celebrate my old age with joy and peace. The fear, the dread is gone.
As you've just heard, we have an extraordinary experience every Thursday morning. We sometimes are tearful, we sometimes have our breath taken away, and we get plenty of laughter. So we have 10 more minutes before dinner is served for those of you who are going to dinner. And I would like to invite you to ask questions. If you have any questions of the people who have read their stories, it's really a great privilege to be in this class. Yes, Nancy.
Your story was so moving. I wonder if you had any further contact with those men.
You know, I'm sorry to say I don't remember anything after that.
Yeah, Nancy asked if Alan had any further interaction with the three men who had rescued them on the road.
That was powerful, but I think that was it. Thank you for asking, but that was it.
I'd like to ask Catherine when you discovered that you were a poet, and how did you do that?
Oh, I don't know. I just kept writing. And I was quite a child when I started. So it's been a part of my life.
Yeah, I learned recently from Catherine that she studied theater, and being at the Beverly Hills Community Presbyterian Church, she was the administrative,
Assistant
at the church, and she put on a number of plays during the time that she was working there. So she has deep roots in theater and in the written word and in the spoken word.
Bryce, I remember when you came to Princeton Seminary, we were a year ahead of you with a whole group from the University Presbyterian Church in Seattle. Can you tell us about that transition from the Navy to seminary?
Well, I tried in my comments to show how I decided that I'd go to seminary because I was asked to spend my career in the Navy, but I didn't want to do that because of some of the reasons I discussed or read about. I think it was the help of that Southern Presbyterian chaplain who would stand the mid-watch from midnight to 4 in the morning with me to just talk about Christian things and my interest in seminary. And I think it was about that time that I began to say that I'd rather go to seminary and invest my life serving others in that way. So, thank you, Dale. I'm not disparaging other people who do it otherwise. I had some good Christian friends in the military, but as for me, I chose this path.
I would like to ask Marilee if you could tell us a little bit about the effectiveness of the people that went like you did as witnesses for peace in protecting those who had been fearful of their lives.
Yeah, well, you don't really know what would happen if you weren't there. Probably nothing. But the main thing for me was my own education. To be with Kakchikel native folks, because that's how it was for me. I was not with other foreigners at all. And it was just such a blessing to be with courageous people who not only were trying to protect themselves, but trying to change the country. I mean, the main person I was accompanying was Lucio Martinez. I mean, he was involved in organizing a new political party. I mean, they were just amazing things that they were doing. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm.
Probably doesn't.
Well, I think it's been interesting to follow what's going on in Guatemala presently with a new president that seems to stand for justice and to try to minimize the number of illegal things that are happening there. And I think there's some trials that are just about to begin that really are attached to the times in which you were there.
Yeah, there are some encouraging things coming out of Guatemala.
Mm-hmm.
Not all, but
Yeah.
Rachel Lausch sent me an article that was listing a lot of things that are happening there,
Right.
which I appreciated very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Marilee. Excuse me. I'm not quite as quick as Terry McGonigal is.
Bryce, I wonder if you would say a little bit about how the moving and distressing experiences that you had when you went to Nagasaki have affected your life since then in terms of being an American and thinking about American policies.
Well, it certainly sensitized me in a very deep way. And I'm not casting dispersions on the people that dropped the bombs. You know, if I had been assigned in the military to do that, I would have had to probably do that. But the ramification of atomic bombs and what it does to people, and total cities just get destroyed. And what was your question again, please?
That was it? You're answering it.
Yeah, well, anyhow, I think it's permanently affected me, and I've been involved in peace kind of concerns since in seminary and graduating from seminary. And then even in Thailand, I tried to, when we served there, tried to relate to the forgotten people, the underclass. The church had gradually become a middle class, upper middle class church, which is fine, but you get new people coming in all the time, and I felt we needed to reach the working class and the workers who hadn't heard the gospel, and so I made a real effort with my Thai friends to do that. So that kind of impacted me in a different way. Thank you.
Howard, I'd like to ask if when you held those two young men at gunpoint, did you say anything to them, or did they say anything to you?
No, I think it was rather quiet. I think they were shocked that we came down through the cornfield, and they were probably scared, and more than anything else. When I grew up, sometimes teenagers, if they found a melon patch, they maybe would take one or two melons home. Well, that's okay. But then sometimes teenagers would take a baseball bat or 2x4 or so and just go right down the melon patch and break every melon they would come to, just for development or so. Oh. But so we got up and went to the melon patch. We didn't know what we would find, but we found two boys were there, and then one of them was running through the cornfield. You can see that. And when the sheriff was coming down, he saw one along the highway, and so I think the idea. I think the justice of the peace did a good thing. He made the boys pay the fine themselves instead of letting their mothers pay the fine. Yeah. Because this was the livelihood, actually, for the person who. Well, he didn't rent the land. My dad just let him use it to grow truck farming things like watermelons, sweet potatoes, and so on.
Wow. Oh, thank you, Howard.
I think the boys were too scared to do anything.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you were also shaking in your boots.
Yes.
Here
I was the same age as they were.
Quite a standoff. Well, I just want to say thanks to each of you. I think that you get a taste of what we experience in the class, and it's really just a very privileged way to get to know your neighbors and fellow residents being a part of this class. Yes, Martin.
I think it'd be worth mentioning that our teacher just encourages us to share and does not critique any part of our writing.
Right.
But encourage us maybe to want to explore something. She is definitely not a judging teacher. She's an encouraging one.
Right.
I've heard people who might want to be a part, but none of us like to be with a critical teacher.
Right. She opens the class with the recommendation that if we want to have criticism or a critique of what we've written, we should say so. And then that's really a class project or a class action, those who want to offer their critique. But no, she is certainly not judgmental and very encouraging, very supportive, and we understand that we respect one another's privacy as far as the willingness to share their stories. So thanks to each one of you today. I think there's something to be learned and gleaned and taken away from all that you have contributed today. So thank you very much. Next week, we will have something a bit different. Our convocation will not be Thursday. It will be Friday, the 26th of April. Mark Eaton, who is the husband of Victoria Eaton, who is the person who arranges all the nice things in the Wellness Center for us and teaches a couple of the classes. And Mark he's at the Claremont Graduate School and also at Azusa Pacific, and he's a research professor in literature, American literature and film, and he has just co-edited a book called Historical Fiction Now, and it's gotten very good reviews. It's an Oxford University Press release. And he's going to be our speaker, but he wasn't available next Thursday. That would be a conflict with his teaching schedule. So he'll be here Friday at 4 o'clock for the convocation next Friday. So please join us then. Thank you.